Coogs House. The Houston Cougars to match up with one Mike Gundy on Sunday. Yes, he's a man. He's well over 40 at this point. But what does he have that Houston can take advantage of?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who came to stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can listen to Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. We appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you found us on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It is so good to see you again. Remember, doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers. We're over the 1,700 mark, approaching 1,750. Hit subscribe to help us get there. Like and comment on the video to let us know you are in the contest. If, after talking about Oklahoma State in this video, you do not necessarily know what to say, you're more of a basketball fan, getting ready for the Cougar basketball game against Towson or whatever, tell us in the comments. Okay, honestly, I got the Kings and Lakers going on the screen inside the room right now. I remember the Lakers always wearing white on Sundays, this iconic alternate uniform. Tell us, are there iconic alternate uniforms that you think of when you think of sports? All right, today's episode is going to be looking at things Houston has to do to beat Oklahoma State this weekend. We're talking about slowing down the ground game. We're going to have it taking shots, not like Little John. And in the last segment, we'll talk some about how to get Bowman off of his spots. Now we got a couple things to talk about along the way there. And again, I want to go segment by segment, but I do want to start off first by issuing an addendum to a thing from yesterday. Yeah, addendum. Yesterday, we opened the show with a segment talking about how, Dana Holgorsen mentioned in his radio show on Tuesday that Matthew Golden would net six figures, $250,000, something like that, if you were an SEC football player, and that that's a very realistic potential problem in the transfer portal, right? Because frankly, Houston has trouble competing with $250,000 for a wide receiver, but that's the kind of wide receiver he is. Duarte reported it. This is not just me reading between lines. I guess like Dana said, right? On the radio show, I think it's interesting that he retweeted the Duarte article, but Matthew Golden took to Twitter to comment directly on the story. And again, we were running with it because it was an interesting tidbit about oh man, we hadn't really put together calculating the roster reconstruction after the fact, after the transfer portal hits this season, right? But he retweeted and said 1,000% committed to what we are building here at U of H. Tough times don't mean you jump ship, especially for a few dollars. We have to finish the season strong. The only thing I'm focused on is supporting my teammates this week against OK State. #UH. Now, credit to Matthew Golden. We'll talk a lot about the roster once the season is over and kind of transitioning that roster into a year two Big 12 roster. But it looks like all systems go with Golden staying in Houston. Now, first segment, we said we want to talk some about the ground game and how to slow down Ollie Gordon. In yesterday's episode, we mentioned also that Ollie Gordon is the star running back. At one point, looked like a Heisman potential get invited to New York kind of guy. I don't know if he would have won, but might have gotten invited if Oklahoma State had kept on winning. 1,250 yards on the ground this season, 12 touchdowns through the 11 games he has played, 34 rushes of over 10 yards. I'd say that mostly is impressive because he's built like a truck, and so that means he's also fast. He's I don't know if actually how his measurables compare to one Derrick Henry. I think he's a little bit smaller, but he looks like that kind of a tall, big, strong runner in a lot of ways. I think it's impressive. He gets 4.06 yards after contact, right? He's actually getting 6.7 yards per carry, but over 4 yards per carry after contact means you've got to be meeting this guy in the backfield. We'll talk more about how to stop in a second, but that's a big, big deal. He runs through tackles. Now, as we mentioned in the Wednesday episode, in the brief segment talking about when we were noticing sticking out on film, he is built to run between the guards. He's that kind of a running back and that kind of running back build. However, he actually ends up getting most of his yardage off of edges. The bulk of his yardage comes off of the left edge, with the second most, as far as gaps for his yardage, going to be off the right tackle, right? And so the interesting thing there is what's happening is teams are loading up to stop him between the guards, and he's bouncing things very quickly and very easily. He's got that kind of foot speed as well. He's not a pass catcher with that foot speed. He's got 29 targets, just 1 touchdown. And frankly, in reviewing more and more film as we get closer to the game, number of drops. It's not his forte. So the ways to stop this guy for Houston will be a couple things on the defensive side of the football, and it does take both sides. On the defensive side of the football, Houston's got to do a good job of maintaining gap integrity and not selling out to do so. That is, that if you are responsible for the C gap, and let's say you're, Nelson Caesar, you got C gap your side, and you see the declaration of an inside dive or inside power or something like that, you cannot vacate the C gap until he has declared and is into that A gap or something else, right? Because what he's got really good vision of is if he's looking at that A gap and his periphery, the way it looks like his helmet on, I should say, is if he sees the A gap and he sees out of the periphery a defensive end collapsing and try and help it on the tackle inside because it takes a lot of guys to bring him down, he really quickly bounces that thing out, right? Now, that's obviously an elite level running back. And I think, frankly, in watching more of Oklahoma State as we get towards today's episode, I think he's the best running back we played this year. I think Taj Brooks is a pro from Texas Tech. Amani Bailey, it might be as well from TCU. I think this one's the best one. Impressive film. Now, that said, once he is in your gap, if you maintain gap integrity and he actually declares your gap, then you've got to make the play, right? I have said it a lot of times as a coach, when I've coached varsity level football, that coaches put you in spots to make plays, and then you have to make it. I'm going to call this route combination to get you open. You got to catch the football and do something with it, right? I'm going to call this blitz to get you at the quarterback. You got to go make him get on the ground, right? Like those kinds of things have to happen. Getting guys in each gaps, maintaining their integrity, and then honestly, at least slowing him down for your buddies to come rally to football once you got him wrapped up, because he is so good at breaking through contact. He's going to break tackles. He is a good football player. He's going to break tackles. But Houston can mitigate the bleeding, slow it down some if they are gap sound and make the play when it's there to be made, or at least, again, hold up the ball, let the buddies get there after the fact, right? The other way to negate him in watching Oklahoma State's losses this season is bluntly score. I mean, Houston, score. Because very, very quickly, they have to get out of the run game if they get down by a couple touchdowns, as we saw against Central Florida, as we saw against South Alabama. And both Central Florida and South Alabama had blowout victories over Oklahoma State because they got up early, and it kind of meant Ollie Gordon was nullified. He's not a pass game catcher. He's not, frankly, even a pass blocker. And taking him out of the game in that sense, sometimes literally they have to sub him out to put somebody else in, changes the dynamics of what they can even run. And that makes your job so much easier as a defense. And I think that like is something intuitively we might all know, but seeing it play out where Major Applewhite South Alabama had success against Oklahoma State just because they got up early means you gotta take those shots. And we'll talk about taking those shots in the second segment. But first, you heard us mention one Major Applewhite, and you might remember when he had, got the job at Houston, it was the hot new thing, and it didn't quite work out. If you want to get a hot new thing for your company and it does work out, you'll find the right people for the right right company, et cetera, right culture and fit, those kinds of things, make sure to go to linkedin.com, use /LockedOnCollege to find the latest and greatest for your team. Because these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You got to be 100% certain that you have the access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the right people for your team faster and for free. Not Major Applewhite, looking for more like those Matthew Goldens. LinkedIn Jobs to find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster for free. Make sure you post your job at linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege. It's linkedin.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Now, our other buddy I want to tell you something about is changing the game. And one thing I think could change this game big time is Sam Brown. Sam Brown is going to be a game changer on Saturday. A game changer for you this Saturday can be Athletic Brewing. Now, Athletic Brewing has changed the game by brewing non-alcoholic brews that taste better than the real thing. I promise. They win all kinds of contests against other actual alcoholic brews from all over the country, and they taste great. They have a bunch of different options: stouts, Goldens. I particularly on a hot summer day in Texas like the sour. I keep it right here to make sure I can represent the exact same. But the sour here, Athletic Brewing does a great job of making great tasting non-alcoholic brews. You can have as many as you want, as often as you want, wherever you are. So go to athleticbrewing.com and use code locked on to get 15% off your first order. That's code locked on, LOCKEDON, checkout for 15% off of your first order at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. All right, I mentioned in a little bit there that a game changer this week could be one Sam Brown. And I mentioned that Houston had to take shots and use their offense to slow down Oklahoma State's offense. I know it's not always the way it works, but I think that's the way it's going to work this Saturday if Houston wants to win. And that's because when Oklahoma State has gotten beaten, the opponents they are playing, Iowa State, South Alabama, and UCF, Central Florida, all take shots and gambles at big plays. So Iowa State won a closer game, won a one touchdown game against Oklahoma State. They had 8 plays of over 15 yards. 4 of those 8 plays were also over 30 yards, right? South Alabama surprised everyone and blew out Oklahoma State early in the season. They had 6 plays of 15 more yards, and 2 of those 6 went for over 50. And then the thing that highlights this is Central Florida beat Oklahoma State worse than we got beat by Kansas State, for what it's worth. I mean, we got shut out. It was 41-0, but 45-3 is by math. I'm a history teacher and a math teacher, but that's 42. Central Florida beat them by 42 points. They threw 11 plays of over 15 yards. 2 of those 11 plays were over 75 yards, a 75-yard and a 92-yard play. Some of these are runs, so I don't mean to say that like it's just through the air, but the easy way to dictate that's through the air, and the easiest way Houston's had success with that is through the air. I also think in looking at this, it's worth pointing out that there were a number of different times in all 3 of these games that the teams, Iowa State, South Alabama, and Central Florida, also took shots attempted, but it got called back on a PI or something like that, or like, so it only ended up being a 15-yard penalty. So what does Houston have to do to get those kinds of plays, especially with no Matthew Golden on the field as he's recovering from injury? First of all, best of luck in speed recovery, Matthew. But as far as this game, it's finding ways to utilize Sam Brown's speed. And I think the way you do that is actually running him combination routes with Joseph Manjack on one side and sometimes Boogie Johnson occupy backside with speed. What I mean by that is the way that Oklahoma State has run a lot of their too high kind of stuff. They run multiple defenses, so I don't mean to say they're only the too high. But the way that Oklahoma State's been doing this too high kind of stuff has been, frankly, with safeties that are having trouble making the play on both deep receivers. That's why so many of these deep balls end up getting open against them and ultimately sealing their fate, right? And so if you have things like Joseph Manjack take away the middle of the field and then Sam Brown take away the sideline, if you have the inverse of that based on where the safeties are leaning, if you can occupy the left safety and pull him down and then really manipulate, flip hips of the right side guy back and forth, there's some sort of a split route there, like I talked about, with one taking the middle, one taking the sideline. Suddenly, you're opening up stuff where they let the ball get behind them, right? Houston has the speed at wideout from Sam Brown is the guy I think is going to do it, but Joseph Manjack, even though he's really more of a do everything kind of guy, Boogie Johnson's got quick footwork, and I could see him getting in and out of guys just by running complicated routes. But you've seen Stacey Sneed line up in the slot some. He's a very fast guy. Dalton Carnes is a speed demon, right? Earned his scholarship, basically become as a formerly walk-on guy, just because he runs all of his routes so hard. Having guys manipulate stuff down the field and confusing the safeties in these deeper coverages is going to open things up. And I would do that personally by making them make a play, occupying the left safety, some sort of a holding pattern or dig route or something, a deep dig that pulls him down. And then I'm going to split that right safety by having one guy do a deep post and one guy do a deep fade route, and he's got to pick one. We're taking the other one, right? Those are the kinds of things I would do if it were up to me now. Dana is an air raid guy, and I know it has not been an air raid kind of season. Frankly, it's not been an air raid kind of couple of seasons, but we know he's got that in his bag somewhere back there in his brain. That stuff is there. And so this week, I hope they're pulling some of those kinds of things out. We've seen in deep mesh concepts, Sam Brown catch deep balls this season. We've seen Houston stay competitive and nearly pull off the comeback against UT Austin with some of these same kinds of things to man jack over the deep middle, right? Like these things are there. Houston just has to have them dialed up and ready for final home game of the year with Senior Day this Saturday. The other thing when I say take shots, though, and this is back to the defense, is go get the football. And all three of Oklahoma State's losses this season, they have multiple turnovers. And frankly, that's because the other team, Iowa State, South Alabama, and Central Florida, were intentional about going to them. Iowa State had 2 picks. I would have argued both of them were big-time gambles, but Alan Bowman is not a great pass to football. We're going to get to him in a second. South Alabama had 2 turnovers and a muffed punt, right? Again, ball security going after it and frankly putting pressure on the punt return team is all what those are. And then against Central Florida, they had 3 picks and a fumble, 4. And in each of those instances, it's being a hawk, find the ball, and going and getting it. You also notice I just counted out 7 interceptions. That's 7 of the 8 interceptions Alan Bowman has this season coming in losses. You can turn him over. You make them turn the ball over through the air. You got a chance. Literally only one other time has he thrown an interception that wasn't in a loss, right? And so again, I think taking those shots, taking those opportunities, and seizing those moments in your last game in TDECU Stadium, frankly, for a large senior class, the last game in a Cougar Red is important, right? Really, really, really important. So again, take shots to the air on offense, take shots going after the ball on defense, and seize the opportunity. Now, if you want to seize the opportunity, if you want to do something of winning of your own this weekend, let me recommend that you go visit our buddies over at PrizePicks, because PrizePicks is doing all kinds of fun daily fantasy kinds of things right now. They've got what's Equinox, where you got football and hockey and basketball and all the things happening at once. They have all kinds of parlays you can do between different sports. You say Travis Kelce receptions and LeBron James made 3-point field goals, let's say over 10.5, right? That means that when Travis Kelce has 7 catches and LeBron James has 4 threes, boom, you got 11 that's over 10.5. They can combine sports across different mediums, and you can stay in the game and be on top of all of your favorite sports and show off your knowledge with PrizePicks. They also have this great injury reboot insurance policy right now that if your entry is based on a player and they get hurt in the first half and do not come back in the second, that thing gets rebooted and you don't lose your money right away. It's a great thing that only PrizePicks is offering. So make sure you go check them out. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code lockedoncollege. They'll do a first deposit match up to $100. Means you put $100 in, they give you $100 matched right away. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Use code lockedoncollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. Prizepicks.com. Go win today. All right. I did mention that Houston needs to get after one Alan Bowman at quarterback in this game. You remember earlier this week, frankly, I was talking about having watched a couple of their early stuff from them, like the South Alabama game, stuff like that. And I was like, oh, wait a second. They're rotating quarterbacks. In earlier games this season, they actually played 3 quarterbacks somewhat intentionally, right? They're cycling through guys. And that was the way they were doing things. They've since decided, it appears, and settled down on, as they've gone throughout more of the year, to play one Alan Bowman as the guy. Now, if that name sounds familiar, bluntly, it's because it is. He was the quarterback at Texas Tech in 2018 and 2019. He was at Michigan for a stretch there in the middle and is now at Oklahoma State. But you remember Texas Tech in 2018, Houston actually lost, but did play them. Houston lost 43-59 in a big-time, high-scoring game. That was like a Derek King kind of Houston team, if you don't remember that back in the day, right? Derek King and Alan Bowman had a quarterback off of all of the ages. I mean, 43 points, 59 points, a lot of offense in that one. Alabama was a very different quarterback, but in that game specifically, he threw 43 of 59, 73% passing for 605 yards and 5 touchdowns and an explosive Tech offense. Very different vibe right now with Alan Bowman. I don't mean to say that he doesn't have the same kind of arm strength. And he can, frankly, probably has more arm strength as he's grown up more now, but he seems to not have the same kind of wideouts or system or trust in the system because he's a newbie here or whatever. This year, he's throwing 58% completions for just 2,100 yards through their 10 games. And I would point out, frankly, it's worth mentioning. I think we got to mention that part of that's because they lean so heavily on the run game, right? And part of that's also because early in the year, he was cycling with other guys for various points of the football games. He has thrown away again 8 picks, 7 of those coming in their 3 losses. And I would also point out that he has 7 picks in their 3 losses. In the first few games of the season, they're rotating guys like a carousel, right? I noticed, the reason that Houston has to get after him, get him off his spots, that when he's on the move, he irrationally trusts his arm strength. That is to say that he'll try some Patrick Mahomesian, let the thing fly, weird arm angle, cross his body into traffic. He has that kind of trust in himself when he's on the move. And you and I both know that he ain't Patrick Mahomes. Only one of those. Right. And so in watching him run around and do that and run for his life, in some games, he's lucky the thing does hit the dirt a lot. In some games, he throws 3 picks like Central Florida. Right. So if they can get after him, with Nelson Caesar, who is, again, one of the best pass rushers in America, invited to the Senior Bowl. Congratulations to he and Patrick Paul, by the way, for both being invited to the Senior Bowl. Probably should open with that. If Nelson Caesar can get after him, Guegbu can get after him, Anthony Holmes can get if these guys can get after the quarterback. Jamari has had a great year rushing the passer, actually, for a big fella, like a big fella. If they can do those kinds of things, he's gonna make bad decisions. He's made bad decisions in each of their losses, right? This is a road game for them. It is in Houston. It's our last home game. Senior day, you're hoping to have a good crowd for it. Saturday afternoon, looks like it's gonna be a nice, crisp day, right? Like those things matter. Getting after him, getting him off of his spots is going to lead to him throwing more erratic footballs. I'm talking throwing like football into the crowd of people, throwing footballs into the dirt on 3rd down. Like he just makes irrational throws. Now, I personally would be doing this with various stunts and twists, not by adding people to the bliss. That means to say that I would run tech stunts or exit stunts, meaning techs would be tackle and cross, right? Or exit, in crosses and the inside tackles. So it just depends who goes first. But you have the end and 4 down front to the end of the tackle, crisscrossing and things like that. I would have those kinds of things happening to open up and free up pass rushing out of those guys. I don't think I would send extra pressure because, frankly, unless it's 3rd and very long, and even if it's 3rd and very long, they might still hand it to him. I want my linebackers at depth that they can find Ollie Gordon, and so that they can track the hip and follow things and stuff like that. Right now, I understand that if it's 3rd and 15, that's a bad example. Actually, we give those up a lot. If it's 3rd and 20, no, we give those up a lot. If it's 3rd and 45, right, then maybe you blitz a linebacker, something like that. I think they can get after it with 4, though. The Oklahoma State offensive line, as far as analytics and Pro Football Focus grades and those kinds of things, does not rank super high. And frankly, their positive rankings are more based on how well they run block than how well they pass block. I think Nelson Caesar should get a multi-sack game here. Frankly, I would not be surprised to see Jamari Caldwell get a pair of his own. And what the heck? Traylon Payne has proved me wrong all year. Traylon, you got one too. Like, I can see these guys stacking up if they can make Oklahoma State one-dimensional. And once they do that, then they get after him. Because, again, they got to do that kind of stuff up the middle. The reason I think they should run exit stunts and tech stunts as opposed to sending extra guys is not just to have a guy being able to track Ollie Gordon at the linebacker level, but that focuses the pressure, the pass rush pressure up the middle, and flushes him out to the sides where he can make those erratic kind of decisions. Again, he does have 30 whole yards rushing this season. I said that chuckling. 30 whole yards rushing this season. He has 2 touchdowns. They were both called run plays. I had to look the second one up, but they were both called run plays. And so I wouldn't worry about him being scamperingly quick on the outside on his own necessarily, which means, of course, on 3rd and 17, he'll pull off a 28-yard run against us because why not? But schematically, I would not necessarily break my back to get ready for that. I'd get ready at getting stops on what they do best. They do best when he's sitting back there patting the ball and letting it fly. Frankly, they do best turn around and handing it off. So those kinds of things, what I would be trying to stop? I'd be trying to stop him by getting in his face. I'm trying to stop Ollie Gordon by being gap sound and having gap integrity and being able, got to make plays when they're there to be made. And I'd make sure that on offense, I took the shots fairly regularly. If you got things you think I missed, if you got things you think you would do, if you got things you think Houston needs to do to beat Oklahoma State, tell us in the comments down below. Appreciate you making the Locked On Coogs your first listen today. I want to recommend going over and checking out that channel, Locked On Sports Today. They're doing all kinds of stuff all day long. So go check them out. Thank you all so much again. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network, and that means your team every day. Go Coogs.